Seeds of Hope is a podcast created on the Lekwungen territory, represented today by Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. We feature special edition episodes at Shianu territory and shared Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh land. As uninvited guests, we hold with immense gratitude and respect the privilege it is to share and cultivate a climate-conscious community here on what we colonially refer to as Vancouver Island. Hi, I'm your host, Claire Marshall, and welcome to the Seeds of Hope Climate Storytelling Podcast. I'm going around my community to chat with folks who are passionate about all things climate, from advocating for more sustainable environmental practices to enhancing well-being through arts-based activities. Today's podcast features Moronke Harris of The Imaginative Scientist. We're going to dive hundreds of meters into the deep sea in conversation with Moronke, a marine explorer, science communicator, and founder of The Imaginative Scientist. So get your remote-operated vehicles ready, and let's dive in. So, Moronke, hi. I'm a stranger to you from the internet, but hopefully not to be a stranger in the future. And I would just love if you told me or whoever's watching just a little bit more about who you are, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Moronke Harris. I'm a deep sea explorer and oceanographer. I study deep sea hydrothermal vents, but I'm now branching into polar science as well. I also do a lot of science communication. So I founded The Imaginative Scientist, which is a science communication and creative consulting brand all about blending traditional outreach and artistry together and creating really impactful experiences for folks who may not see science as an avenue they'd like to take just yet.
Yeah. Exactly. What was your background in undergrad? I'm not sure if you mentioned that. Were you always like, I want to be an ocean scientist? I feel like everyone, when they're little, I don't know, well, at least from my experience, everyone was like, I want to be a marine biologist. And I don't think anyone really knew what that meant. Or they associate marine biology with the study of like cetaceans and dolphins and whales. So what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, I do get asked all the time about dolphins and sea turtles.
Oh, you're probably like, God, not another dolphin.
Yeah. I don't know anything about them.
Yeah. That's okay.
But I was a late bloomer. I took biological science in undergrad, so I kept it very broad. I took pre-med courses, I took animal biology courses, ecology courses, anything I could get my hands on really. And I didn't take a marine ecology course until my last year of undergrad. And then during that course, I had to write a literature review on a topic of my choosing. And I grew up watching a lot of ocean documentaries. And James Cameron's The Abyss was big for me as well when I was younger. Maybe not so age appropriate, but
yeah,
I really liked
funny.
it. So I knew I wanted to write my literature review on something deep sea. So I was just Googling deep sea environments, and I found hydrothermal vents, which is my specialty now. And when I found that, the more videos I watched about them and the more papers I read, I was just completely enthralled. It was like my Oprah moment, my aha moment.
I love that, the Oprah moment. Wow.
So that sucked me in, and after that I went from internship to internship, starting in shallow water science, ocean science, and working my way towards the deep sea, and now I'm in grad school at UVic.
I love that. Okay, random kind of question is like, where are these hydrothermal vents? Like, do you have to go very far? We're here in like what we colonially refer to as Victoria, BC, and Lekwungen territory. How far are we going out from here, from Victoria, to find a hydrothermal vent?
Almost 300 kilometers off the west coast of the island is
gosh.
Where the closest vents are. They're all over the world because 65% of hydrothermal vents are found on mid-ocean ridges, and the mid-ocean ridge is this underwater mountain chain that stretches like 75,000 kilometers around the earth, kind of like the seams on a baseball. And hydrothermal vents are mainly found there. So we have the Juan de Fuca Ridge, where the Endeavour vents are found, and those are like the most famous Canadian vents. We also have the Southern Explorer Ridge, where the Magic Mountain vents are found, and I'm studying those for my thesis, so I'm partial to those.
I love that you have a partial vent.
Yeah. But they're also 1,000 to 4,000 meters deep, so very far out to where the tectonic plates are diverging and pulling apart, and then thousands of meters down. So we use submersibles to get to them.
Okay, and that's a question that I think I had written about. Just, I was wondering, whenever you're going to these hydrothermal vents, and you mentioned submersibles, so are those like little robots, like Roombas that we're sending? Are we sending down little Roombas down to the ocean floor to like, are you getting back like actual visuals, or are you getting back like just like chemical like samples for analysis? Like, yeah, what are you getting through those submersibles?
It's a mixture of everything, really. We do get videos. People use HOVs or human operated vehicles, but in general we use ROVs, which are remote operated vehicles, and those are tethered to the ship by fiber optic cable, and all the scientists and pilots sit in this room called the control room, which is like a dark room. I always say about the size of 3 shipping containers, and you have about 20 people sitting in there, and we're all wearing headsets and communicating. It's kind of like mission control for rocket launches.
I've seen pictures of you, and you look so cool. I can't believe it. Oh, it looks so cool. Yeah, it does look like mission control. It's like with like the space missions for NASA.
Yes.
Like if you ever see like clips, like I am kind of nerdy. I do like space a lot. You're probably like, oh, Claire, there's so much to see underwater. We know more about space and underwater, and I'm totally here for that. I just love both.
Yeah, they are both very cool, and they're cousins in a way.
They are cousins, and one is just like okay, no, wait, am I gonna sound silly? One is extremely under pressure, and isn't like space the absence of pressure? So are they kind of opposites in that way?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm actually next week or the week after, I'm doing a panel at Startup Fest on like space versus ocean, and I'm on Team Ocean, and we're going to talk about how the technology can be transferable, because you're fighting pressure just in 2 different directions. In the ocean you're fighting being crushed, and in space you're fighting being sucked into the vacuum. So
wait, this is so cool. Okay, we're branching.
Yes.
I knew we would, but so what's happening next week? So you're going to be talking about like your Team Ocean and someone's from Team Space, and you're going to be like talking about what that means for like research and like exploring these abysses.
Exactly, yeah. It's like a friendly conversation about how our sectors can find common ground and work together, and why we're not doing that already at the capacity that we need to. So
I'm picturing a rap battle.
Oh, that would be amazing. Unfortunately, I cannot rap.
Oh no.
But I could do a slam poetry piece.
Oh, I would be here for that. I would be so here for that. Oh my gosh, that is so neat. Okay, well, like I said, we're diverging, but I think that's really neat, and I would love to. Is this like live on TV, or is this on social media?
There'll be photos that I post afterwards, but it's a Startup Fest is a ticketed event. So
okay, cool.
Yeah, if you bought the ticket, you could come. It's in Montreal.
Oh, cool.
July 9th.
It's Montreal. You going to Montreal next week? Oh,
yeah. Well,
wow.
July 9th, so the week after. Yeah.
Okay, that's so. You travel a lot.
Yes, I do.
It seems. Like how much? Okay, we're gonna step back. So just similar to you, I also took like my kind of like Spark science course, and I got involved in ornithology the last semester of college. I always loved birds, but like that was like it when I actually saw people doing research in like ornithology. And so for you, did you mention it was like you needed to write a thesis for that last semester of college, and like you just like picked hydrothermal vents, and like that became your like spark. We call it a spark bird, like the bird that got us excited. That was like your spark science subject where you're like, I want to do this?
Absolutely, yeah. I had never felt that amazed by an area of science. There are a lot of scientific areas and sectors that are incredible, but I had never felt that enthralled by something. So it was a real moment where I was like, I don't know anybody in this sector. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it. And Google became my best friend. So all the opportunities I got leading up to grad school was me spending hours and days on Google searching and applying and refusing to self-reject and failing and winning and retrying, and
No, that means a lot, I think, for me and for fellow people in like STEM, which I should say stands for science, technology, engineering, math. And then also I've heard it be referred to as STEAM these days, where we add arts in there, which I love and I'm super here for. And from what I've seen from me Googling you, you also seem really into the arts and communication, which is something I really love. But that means a lot as just someone who's spent time at the computer, where I'm like, where do I go next, like with my science career and like wildlife career? And sometimes it feels like wasted time on there, where I'm just like, what I could be cleaning the dishes or something like that when it comes to like looking for future opportunities. But no, you're saying that like you use Google, you send out emails, and it got you to like this really exciting place that you are today.
Absolutely, yeah. And it taught me a lot of resilience as well, and adaptability, learning how to find my own opportunities and put my best foot forward, and believed that I could achieve, so why not just try? Yeah.
So why did you choose UVic for graduate studies? That's like one of the places Google led you to?
Yeah.
Why here?
Because Google led me to the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences for my first internship, and while there, my mentor there, I told her that I wanted to, Yvonne Sewall, shout out.
Shout out. Show notes.
I told her that I wanted to get into deep sea exploration and science, and she told me about Dr. Kim Juniper, who was my advisor. So I was able to apply years down the line, about 2 years down the line, to his lab based on the connection that she made between the two of us. And he was the chief scientist of Ocean Networks Canada, and he was a professor at UVic and a specialist in hydrothermal event microbiology. Yeah.
That's really neat. Okay, and so you came over to that lab for your master's program?
Yeah, I started in a master's, rolled up to PhD, have now rolled back down to master's because Kim passed away, unfortunately, last year. So that's the mentorship that I felt I needed, I no longer had. So it's part of the adaptability journey, you know.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, that's okay.
But you're back in your master's and on set to, do you have like an idea for if you want to continue to do your PhD in the future? Is that on the agenda?
Yeah, I mean, the States is always, the States, you know, nowadays, but we don't need to go too in depth there. That's
I
not
will
the
look
topic.
at the camera for that. I'm a dual citizen, Moronke. So you're allowed, keep going.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get it. It's all I'm saying is I get it. As someone who's also a scientist and like considering PhD, the States is like 100% where I would want to probably be looking.
Yes.
But not right now.
Yeah. But they are absolutely a powerhouse for deep sea exploration and science. Like they have Schmidt Ocean, which is privately owned, nonprofit, but they also have Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, which is like the oldest oceanographic institute in the world.
Shout
I
out.
think, or at least in North America. And they just have so much funding for deep sea exploration that it feels like a practical next step for a PhD. Also interested in Europe, though. Yeah.
I'm actually the exact same. Where it's like, for me, it does seem like the most options for me as someone who wants to pursue like research and a career like stemming environmental sciences and community and arts. Like that's on the agenda. But Europe is, I could be swayed easily if I found the right thing to pursue in Europe. So anyway, that's really cool, and I love to see that you're on that like mission and journey. But like we'll flash back or we'll bring it back to like here in Victoria and doing your master's. So are you studying specific hydrothermal vents, you said, that are is that the one that's 300 kilometers off this coast, or are those different ones?
Yeah, I mentioned the Magic Mountain vent field and also the Main Endeavour vent field. Those are the two well-known ones in Canadian waters, and Magic Mountain is part of my thesis, and so is Endeavour, actually. Those are the two chapters of my thesis, those two locations. And
Endeavour, that's so cool because that's also a space mission. Fun fact. That's really neat. And what stage are you at in your master's process?
I'm writing my thesis, so hoping to will defend this fall, willing it. And I'm wrapping up, so it feels nice. It feels like a good bow on the end of this journey.
Yeah, and so the research that you're doing or that you've done for this thesis, is that stemming from like your time out on the ocean, on what are they referred to as expeditures always, or ocean research or deep sea research?
Yeah, expeditions and deep sea research expeditions is mainly what we say. Sometimes they're called cruises. Actually,
oh my
in
gosh,
the scientific world. And
I didn't really. Yeah, my cruise.
Whenever I say I'm going on a cruise, people think, Royal Caribbean or something. But deep sea is kind of like that. I mean, there's buffets and there's pastry time, 3 o'clock pastry time. But yeah, there is good funding in deep sea, I will say that.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, very that's kind of surprising even for me with like bird biology, I think there's pretty good funding there too. So way to pick a field where there's not a scarcity mindset, because oftentimes in STEM there is scarcity mindset.
Very much
so I love that. I actually do want to hear about your buffets out.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I talked to to Paige Hunter in a previous episode, and we talked about her time at COP27, I believe, which was in Egypt in 2023. And I wanted to hear all about the food that people eat at COP, and I was very surprised by what I learned about the food at COP. So I would love to hear about the food on the ocean next.
Yeah, there's everything. Like sometimes if we're in international waters, we catch our own seafood as well, or the chefs do. So there's like fresh ceviche, sometimes shrimp tacos.
No.
Yeah, steaks. It's so good. It's so good.
Like fish steaks.
No,
real steaks.
Like real steak. We have beef as well.
You're eating better than I do on any given day here.
And it depends how long you're out, because most of these expeditions last 2 weeks. My longest one was 40 days. So on some ships, the fresh veggies and fruit die down after a while. So your last week, you might be having a lot of canned vegetables.
Okay.
Yeah. But the planning is good. I mean, the food lasts for a long time.
Do you ever, you get it probably, maybe annoyed at this question, but do you get sick out at sea?
Yeah.
How do you get over that?
Bonine is a great brand of seasickness medication.
Got it. Okay.
I'm definitely not somebody who... There are plenty of scientists on the ships who just stomach it through and go through their sickness unmedicated. I am not that brave. So getting ahead of it is important before the ship even starts moving. But it wasn't until my last expedition that I was very sick. I usually have a pretty good stomach for it. But of course it's when I started to brag that I don't get seasick, that I got violently seasick last summer. So
I'm so sorry. Was that the 40-day mission that you were out
No, that was a 28-day one in the sorry, I touched my mic.
Oh, that's okay. Don't worry.
It was a 28-day one in the area around American Samoa. So the 40-day one was the Galapagos Rift, and that was incredible because that's the birthplace of vents.
Of the oldest
Well,
ones?
the very first vents were found in 1977 on the Galapagos Rift, and it's this area called the Rose Garden Vent Field because there were all these giant tube worms that they saw, which have this white chitin sheath, and then the tube worm itself is a blood red color, so it looks like bouquets of roses. And they tower over the submersibles. They're huge, 6 feet long. So.
I'll have to put together a little a picture presentation of some of these things to actually see. That's so cool. Did you deploy from Galapagos for that?
We left from Costa Rica.
Oh, okay.
And then we sailed through to the Galapagos Islands. We had a day where we got to get off the ship and explore, and then we ended the cruise in Panama. So it was a very multi-country cruise.
Yeah. Oh, you're living a dream. That's such a dream. Which island did you get off at?
The main one.
Is it?
I want to say Santa Maria.
Okay, yeah. I'm thinking Santa Cruz, but that's a skateboard brand.
It probably was Santa Cruz. Yeah, because it was the Puerto Ayora.
Yeah, I know exactly. I've been to Galapagos.
The main city.
That's why I'm tell me more. That's really cool. Yeah, Galapagos is such a beautiful place. Did you see any of the really cool lizards that are just sunbathing?
Yeah, the marine lizards.
Yeah,
I love them.
Dinosaurs. They look like dinosaurs. That's so neat. Wow.
There was so much rich biodiversity there.
Big birding place too.
Oh, yeah.
that was the epitome of where we learned a lot about, I think, evolution with Charles Darwin's finches, or what we have referred to as the birthplace of evolution, is Galapagos Island. So that's really cool to get to explore that. Okay, I have a question again. We're going to bring it back a little bit. If you had to explain what a hydrothermal vent was to me, because what I'm sitting here picturing as someone who doesn't know what it exactly is it a volcano underwater? Or is it not that at all?
I mean, that's a close term. If you were going to compare it to something, you could compare it to a volcano. But it is a hot vent on the deep sea floor, thousands of meters down, and it spews out superheated water that can reach up to 400 degrees Celsius, and that water comes out like a black smoke. We call them black smokers. And there are white smokers as well, and different chemicals that are happening in the water there. But essentially the coloration comes from the metals and minerals that hot water picks up as it shoots through the Earth's crust back to the seafloor. And that's how vents are formed, by the deposition and precipitation of those metals and minerals within the plumes themselves, forming the chimneys that construct the vent. And they can reach, there was a vent in the main Endeavour field before it toppled over named Godzilla, and it was 30 meters tall. So some of these are like 3-story buildings almost. They're huge.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're also just little baby vents when they start to form. So.
Okay, cute. And so when they're younger vents, they're babies. And are we like, is Earth, how many vents are we making here on Earth?
We estimate that there are about 600 known vents on mid-ocean ridge systems. So there are also vents on back arc basins, and there's one other location, geological location, that I'm forgetting now, but I focus on the mid-ocean ridge ones. And we estimate about 600 to 700 known vents there.
And are they helping, why are they important? Are they helping like the Earth regulate its temperature and like breathing and like getting rid of things from like Earth's inner core and like sending it out into the ocean? Is that like a part of like Earth's regulatory nervous system? If that makes sense.
They do contribute heavily to the biogeochemical cycle of the Earth, because they're contributing those metals and minerals. But specifically with the biological life, they're so incredible biologically because everything down there survives and thrives in complete darkness and under crushing pressure. So when they were discovered, it was like nothing humanity had ever seen. And everything down there runs off of something called chemosynthesis, which is like photosynthesis, but instead of using the sun for energy, it uses little tiny bacteria at the bottom of the food web at hydrothermal vents use the chemical energy coming out of the vents themselves to sustain everything else going on there.
Wow.
So it's a pretty special environment. And chemosynthesis happens like in Yellowstone National Park. The geysers there have chemosynthetic bacteria as well, but we hadn't ever seen it happening within the ocean at that level of productivity. And it's like an oasis of life in the middle of what was thought to be a barren basin.
A dead zone, right?
Yeah.
Or what people would have considered biodiversity, like the opposite of a hotspot.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Is this where, from my science background, is this where like anglerfish and archaea are hanging out?
Yes.
Is that right?
Archaea for sure. Anglerfish don't really like the heat, but they are in the deep sea. So if you go a little bit away from the vents, you will probably find an anglerfish on a rocky outcrop somewhere.
Oh, so cute. Did people send you that anglerfish that like came up to the top of the like, have you seen this on social media? There was
it like a pink, one of the little pink ones, like the chaunacops?
Tickled Britain. No, I'm not sure who exactly, like what species it was, but it was all over social media in the past like year or so, and it was because this one anglerfish, the internet like got a hold of it. This like photographer, videographer got on camera very randomly this anglerfish like coming up to the top of the surface where they would usually never be found, and like the internet loved it because they were like, before he died, he wanted to see the sun. It was so
That's so sweet.
Okay, lady, my God. Yeah, she's really tiny.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they can get a little bit bigger, but they do start out quite small.
And she was little. It was really emotional. I'll have to send it to you so you see what I'm talking about. Yes. He looked giant in Finding Nemo. He did look big. They tricked us in that way. But so she's like so she's like super, super little, but you can't really tell in the video until like the photographer person like zooms out or something. And the internet was like, she's so small and she needed to see the sun. And then like, so if you're, as a science communicator, do you like Hank Green?
Yes, yeah.
We love Hank Green.
Complexly Media.
Yeah, shout out to Complexly and access to like free or like affordable education. We love that. Yes. Anyway, Hank Green was obviously like, guys, like she didn't want to see this. He was like, she was probably sick, and that's why she was like out of her natural habitat and like just did something like really random and just was like, I don't know if it's similar to dogs going away to like die.
Yeah,
anyway, she was probably just sick, and she was little, so she wasn't probably that old. But anyway, like I really like the poetry part of that.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I'd like to believe that she wanted to see the sun.
Yeah.
Sorry, Hank.
Yeah, sorry, Hank. I think that there's like a really good equal amount of like we, can like project human feelings if that's a way to help us connect and love the world around us. Why not? As long as we're doing so respectfully and not like fully anthropomorphizing. That word keeps coming up, I feel like, in some of these podcasts, anthropomorphizing things. But yeah, anyway, I digress from our sweet little anglerfish. But mostly we're talking about like archaea. We're not necessarily talking about like fish, but more like bacteria.
Well, that's the bottom of the food web there. There's everything. Like, I study the bacteria. There are archaea as well. There are even viruses living on the vent. So that's the microbiology side. But in terms of biology that you can see the bacterial mats. They look like white shag carpets because they get so thick on active vents. But in terms of biology that you can see that's outside of the microbiology realm, there are fish, and there are those characteristic tube worms that everybody knows, and different species. So in the Galapagos Rift, you have the giant ones that get 6 feet in length. Up here, they're smaller. They're about 1 foot long, and they're a lot skinnier.
The worm is 6 feet?
Yeah, the worm is 6 feet, and they grow in bouquets of roses, so clusters, and they tower above our submersibles. It's something. Some people, I really think it's wild. Cool. Some people get very creeped out.
Yeah.
There was a scientist on the Galapagos Rift expedition that was collecting them for biological study, and he took it out of the white chitin sheath, and it just kind of slumped into the tray, and it was it was a very interesting experience for me. It was nothing I had ever seen before. That's as much as I'll say about it. Maybe I'll send you a photo of it later so you can see what it looked like. But it was quite weird.
I would love to. I'm halfway between wow, that's wild. I don't know how I feel about that, but also being really, really wanting to know more and see it. You know, when something you shouldn't want to see something, but you do want to see it. That's how I am right now. Well, also because isn't it hard to take that from that environment and bring it up, because you don't know how if I remember correctly from my background, you don't know how the body exposed to oxygen will react or something, so it could just melt, or is that right? I don't know.
You do have to work very quickly with deep sea samples when we bring them up, because they come from a region. If they're not right by the vents, then the ambient seawater is 2 to 4 degrees Celsius. So everything is processed quickly and put in freezers or fridges or cold rooms, because if you leave it out in the sun, especially deep water corals and stuff like that, they will disintegrate and start to fall apart. It's once the submersibles come up, it's a mad dash to get your samples processed and into the correct states.
I love that. I'm just picturing have you seen The Bear?
Oh, I've heard of it. Okay. I have seen an episode or 2 off of Netflix.
Okay, I talk way too much. I talk way too much about TV shows I'm finding on this, but it's how I relate to life. But yeah, in The Bear, there's a scene where everyone's super stressed, but the chef's kitchen, and there's this song that's and anytime we play something really stressful, I play that music in my head, and so I'm picturing that you bring up these deep sea organisms, and the Bear theme song comes on, and you're just I need to get these in the freezer.
Gotta get them processed.
Gotta get them processed right now. That's awesome.
Part of what I do for the Ocean Exploration Trust is I work as a science manager, so I manage what happens with sample collection on the submersibles that are 6 feet tall beastly machines. And then I manage what happens with sample processing within the wet labs afterwards. So I'm very much in that zone.
In the zone. Wow, that is such a high pressure situation, but that's really cool. You're a manager for what's the word again? You're a science manager.
Science manager for the Ocean Exploration Trust, and they're also known as Nautilus Live because they do a lot of broadcasting. So whenever they're doing scientific expeditions and dives, you can go on nautiluslive.org and watch the dives happen and watch the scientists in the control room, and also type in questions.
Oh my gosh.
We have science communication fellows that sit in the control room with us and say, let's say Matt from Scotland wants to know, blah, blah, blah. And then somebody in the control room will answer the question. So we bring the audience along with our exploration as well. And Schmidt Ocean does that as well, but the Nautilus was the first deep sea exploration ship to actually start doing that back in 2008. So
that's really neat. Wow. How did you get into that from your master's program?
I was collecting, it's one of those opportunities that I got by applying through finding opportunities on Google. Got rejected the first time, tried again, and then got it, and then it was 2020, so the pandemic happened. So I was supposed to intern for them. And instead, I ended up doing some science communication work for them. But then they invited me on the ship the following year, and they were going to the main Endeavour vent field, which I was studying for my own samples. So it was a 2-bird, 1-stone sort of thing where I got to finish my internship, and I also got to do some science I almost got to. It's a long story. We lost the submersible. We rescued it, but it became
Sauce.
detached. So that's another story.
Oh, no.
So I didn't get any of my samples.
Oh, no.
But it's okay. I got a heck of an experience.
That's We'll just beep it.
Yeah.
You're totally fine.
Yeah.
I love that. And that's important. Like you said, that builds, or you mentioned resiliency. I feel like that builds some resiliency.
Exactly.
Losing your submersible.
Yeah. So then after the internship, I applied to be a science manager and got the job. And now during the summer, I go out with them for at least 1 or 2 expeditions contractually. And I'm actually leaving on July 22nd to go to sea for a month. So.
Whoa, that's so cool. Okay, before I learn more about this, which I want to hear about, I'd love to just ask the question, how do you kind of bridge climate science with hydrothermal vents? What are there ways that the hydrothermal vents are changing and responding to climate change and ocean acidification? And do you consider yourself climate scientist in that respect?
I do, because even though the deep sea, especially hydrothermal vents, they're kind of in their own bubble of a self-sustaining ecosystem, and they're contributing a lot to other ecosystems. But everything in the ocean is connected, right? So stuff that affects the higher layers of the ocean will then affect the deep sea, because there's this huge carbon exchange happening in the ocean when animals in shallow water pass away and then sink to the bottom of the ocean, and that carbon and life then is able to sustain deep sea life as well. So luckily hydrothermal vents are in a sector that's very affected by climate change right now, but I can see it happening later on as climate change progresses. If the higher levels of the ocean are affected, then hydrothermal vents will be affected as well. Not originally, but eventually is the word I'm looking for. But the main issue affecting hydrothermal vents right now is deep sea mining, and that's another climate issue because it affects the vents directly. So basically hydrothermal vents have a lot of metals and minerals, and different companies are looking at developing technology to be able to mine those metals and minerals to power the climate transition, actually. So it's because we need metals for windmills and stuff. So that's how it's being framed. But when you mine a hydrothermal vent, you can stir up all the sediment and toxic metals that will then create a plume that can travel tens of thousands of kilometers and then smother other ecosystems within the oceans, shallow water ecosystems, other deep water ecosystems. So that's part of the reason why we shouldn't do it. And that's the main thing that's affecting the climate world within hydrothermal vents right now. Yeah.
And you also mentioned deep sea coral systems, which I didn't know. So this is a thing? Deep sea coral?
Yeah,
okay.
Corals that go down to 6,000 meters. They're called cold water corals, colloquially, and they differ from shallow water tropical corals in that they don't need sunlight to survive, and instead they survive off of detritus in the current that's carried towards them. So they're just eating whatever they can catch in the water. So you often find them in areas where there's a rocky cliff in the deep sea and you see a lot of current or a rock wall, and they're beautiful. They're so lush. There's over 3,200 species that scientists have named.
Wow.
And they're discovering more and more through genetic analysis as well. So I don't know, it's not my specialty, but that's what I do know about them. And yeah, they're completely amazing. If anybody who's listening to this podcast right now should look them up. Look up deep sea coral gardens or cold water coral gardens, and you'll see just how lush they can get, and the diversity of shape as well, because there are fan shapes, bottle shapes. It's quite incredible, all sorts of different colors.
Yeah. And are these ecosystems threatened, you mentioned, from these bottom trawling deep sea companies that are extracting these minerals?
They're threatened by trawlers. They're also threatened by a different type of deep sea mining that's targeting seamounts. So it's called cobalt crust deep sea mining, and they want to basically peel the crust off the side of the seamount. And that, it's not in a very, it's troubling, but it's not in a very high stage of development right now. It's actually, it's behind hydrothermal vent mining, because there are 3. So there's the polymetallic nodules that you hear a lot about in the news. That's at the most advanced stage of development. And then there's the hydrothermal vent mining, and then there's the cobalt crust on the seamounts. And well, obviously peeling the crust off of a seamount would destroy whatever is relying on that seamount face to live. So that's a threat to the deep sea corals as well.
Wow. And I think this is kind of a good bridge to a topic. I can't get my questions up, which is totally fine because I remember most of them and what you talked about wanting to chat about. And one of them was imagination.
Yes.
And so it's almost like, okay, imagination can be used for the better or the worse, because in that case, who is sitting around having coffee and thinking, how about we pull the crust off of
a seamount,
the whole crust off of a seamount? Like, that's wild. What is the purpose of that? Or like, how is that helping anyone? That's just a form of extraction for minerals too?
Yeah, minerals and metals, and it's been framed as, and we do need minerals and metals for the green transition. But my late advisor, when he was still around, he was talking about how in the 80s and the 70s, when this was first brought up, deep sea mining, it was, look how much money we can make. There's so many minerals in the deep sea that we can turn into profit. And now as time has gone on and the world has changed, the narrative has slowly changed towards, well, we need them for the green transition. So he had his doubts about where, and I mean, it's up to the audience to decide for themselves, but he had his doubts about where the impact and the need for it was actually coming from, and if the narrative had just changed to something that was more palatable, to excuse why we would do it. Yeah.
Wow. Well, on the better end then, what do you think that like your research and even like your late professor's research, like what brought you to the idea of like imagination being such a critical part of like climate movement and ocean research, deep sea research? I feel like that's like, when I think of imagination, like that's one of the places that it's just like space, like that's where the imagination goes wild, you know.
Absolutely.
In a good way.
Yes.
In a good way.
Yeah. Deep sea science is all about exploration and innovation, and that's what really drew me to the sector. Sector.
It sounded very fancy.
Thank you.
I was like, have I been saying it wrong? You said it confidently, and I was like, I've been saying it wrong this whole time. The sector,
yeah.
I love that.
So that's what drew me in. But with exploration and innovation, imagination is required, and in all of science, it's required for the advancement of the field in itself. But I like to use imagination in the sense of trying to see, well, like many scientists, I suppose, like trying to approach a problem from a completely different viewpoint and see how I can come up with new ways of thinking about old concepts that people have thought of for a very long time, and like what innovation I can bring to the sector in that way. That is also safe for the environment, because as we were talking about, innovation can go either way. Innovation and imagination can be used for good, or it can be used for not so good, and it really depends on what your definition of good is.
Have you seen any like examples that come to mind of people that are using the imagination for good, or people that inspire you to like keep thinking kind of outside of the box? Like, are there any people that you're like, their work needs to be amplified?
Definitely, yeah. There are scientists that I've met while working for the Nautilus that are on the robotics side of things, and they're actually training and developing systems for AUVs, so autonomous automatic vehicles, to go out into the deep sea and be controlled from land. So in the future, you could control these robot submersibles from the comfort of your own home.
Oh my gosh.
And the more, that just makes it more accessible, right? Because ships aren't very accessible for many people. It's a very closed off and niche world, and we're missing out, I think, on quite a bit of the innovation that we could have by not having more diverse voices in the sector and more diverse experiences coming with us on these ships. So being able to do that research from land would really open it up to a lot of people and make it more affordable as well, because it's quite expensive to be out there. So in that robotics research, it's the University of New Hampshire, and they're working with this AUV called Drix, and they're using it to communicate with other submersibles that are in the ocean and tell those other submersibles when to sample, where to sample. So it's like this feedback relay of robots talking to each other hundreds of kilometers from shore and completing research that we used to have to do, or mostly do in person. So, yeah.
That's really neat. Is this like, when we say robots, first of all, I love that they have names. I think that's really key. I love it when a robot has a name. But are they like employing, when you said like they're talking to each other, is this kind of like a form of, or is this like employing, like, is this artificial intelligence for the good? Like, is this a good form of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, there is some artificial intelligence wrapped up in what they use. I'm not a technologist, so I don't know exactly how it works, but it is artificial intelligence for the good. And there are people on that topic. There are people using artificial intelligence to determine where marine protected areas should be instated, where ecosystems of interest should be protected. And so there is a lot of that happening within the ocean sector as well with AI.
I feel like that's not something, we, at least in my realm of artists and environmentalists, like I do see, and for good reasons, a lot of people talking about the negative impacts of artificial intelligence and AI, but it's really interesting to hear. Oh my tummy is growling. It's because I ate that pretzel. But it's refreshing to hear, and something I think that AI can also be like looked at on that kind of positive note of just like increasing accessibility for people, for knowledge and like language, and for science as well. And that kind of also, I'd love to talk about imagination like all day long too, but that also brings me to that kind of idea that something that felt very important to you about like the accessibility of the STEM science like field, and that's something that you felt that is like it's something you want to talk about and bring to like your platforms, is like how we need to center like more women, youth, BIPOC folks, people in underrepresented groups, the queer community. Like is that something you feel passionate about, like connecting people to the world of STEM within those groups? Yeah,
that's why I founded the Imaginative Scientists, because I always say that I try to create the world within science that I felt that I needed when I was starting out. Like I try to, deep sea science especially, but all sectors of science are communicated through that platform that I have, and I try to make it as inviting and engaging as possible. And I'm somebody who would have gone to art school if I didn't follow science. So that's something that I use within my science communication to bring more artistic minds into the field and get people who may not think that they could be in science or they could understand science to be more interested in it, because science is hard, but we need all sorts of different brains and ways of thinking within the sector to drive innovation. So I am very passionate about opening up experiences and options within the field to multiple different people who may not have seen themselves within whatever field they choose, or whatever sector of the field they choose down the line. Yeah.
Have you had any like good conversations with folks within your field about this like importance of representation that stood out to you? And like what to you do you have like a way to put in words like what seeing other people as your like inspiration has meant to you as a scientist, and like for it given you the ability to be like vulnerable and brave and be on the internet and talking about things that you care about?
Yeah, there's this there are two scientists that I really look up to. One is named Dr. Verena Tunnicliffe, and she was on the crew or part of the group of scientists when hydrothermal vents were first discovered. I got the chance to go to sea with her to the Galapagos Rift in 2023, and she was telling me how much the sector has changed, because there were all these young women on our science team, and she was telling us how when she started going to sea, she was usually the only woman, and it was very hard to get those positions. So she was just really happy to see how much within her lifetime the sector had changed, and how there's even diversity of women on the ships now as well, not just women that look like her, So that was a great experience for me to firsthand hear what it was like from a veteran in the field, really, and hear the positive trajectory that we're on. And then there's another deep sea scientist, or she works in GIS, so Geographic Information Systems, but her name is Dr. Dawn Wright, and she was the first Black person to go to Challenger Deep, which is the deepest point of the ocean in the Marianas Trench. I think it's over 11,000 meters down. So,
oh my!
Wild.
So she was in it.
She was in the submersible.
You taught us ROV, which is remote, and then
this was an HOV, so human operated vehicle.
Okay, and this is the deepest like part of the ocean.
Yeah.
And we can send people there.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a baby. I don't know these.
I think she was the 27th person to go.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd love to make it 28. I always say, send me down there. I'm ready.
You would go?
Yes, absolutely.
Tomorrow?
In a heartbeat.
I feel like I kind of just got like claustrophobia. No. Oh my goodness. Okay, so
Yeah.
you would go into Mariana's Trench.
Yes.
That's wild. Are there vents down there? Or are we like
No,
looking- okay.
it's a trench, so you get abyssal plains, and so you get a lot of silt, like thick sediment, meters of sediment, because it's all the sediment that's rained down from the higher layers of the ocean, and river outflows into the ocean, so it's thick mud down there.
Wait, so do you go to like the top of the thick mud, because you're obviously not going through the thick mud?
Yeah, you
There's
just
thick
land
mud
on
in
top
the
of it.
ocean?
Yes, and then you have to wait for it. I'm talking like I've been down there, but
That's okay.
just passing on
I love
Dawn's
that.
insights.
You're putting it into the universe.
Yeah.
You will be down there. I see it. Remember us.
Yes, I will.
Well, not like you're not going to come back. Cut that. Remember me when you're down there
Yes,
with let me see it through your eyes, because that's really cool, and I'd be too scared to go, mostly, is what I'm trying to say.
That's fair,
Yeah. Okay, so you're landing on top of like really thick soft mud.
Yeah,
But you're
and
not like sinking?
No, because it's compacted enough that it's been down there for a while, but it is very fine silt, so you do kick up dust, then you have to wait about an hour or more for the dust to settle, and then you can see what you want to sample. So they don't really move around, from my understanding, when you take an HOV into the trench. Wherever you land, you land. You might do a little bit of moving, but you don't want to have to keep moving and then waiting for the dust to settle. So they kind of sample and take videos of whatever is around them.
Okay.
And,
Wow. I'm just stuck right now on the fact that you have to land on this like thick mud, and then because when you're walking through a pond, I totally know what you're talking about. Like you're walking, you can't see anything because all this like dirt and mud's coming up. And so are you looking out through glass, or are you looking through like a video camera?
You look through glass. And I would assume they have video cameras as well, but they have portholes on some of them where you can look through the glass.
Yeah, and so you're completely encompassed by mud at the bottom of the ocean, in the deepest part of the ocean that humans have traveled, or period, the deepest part of the ocean?
Deepest known. So maybe there's another trench that's even deeper that we just don't know about yet.
Whoa, that's really that's really wild. And so you're just waiting for the dust to settle before you like officially can see things.
Yes.
Terrifying to me that idea, because I would just think that I'm just sinking.
Oh yeah.
I feel like that is so wild. And are there anglerfish here?
Yeah, I'm sure that there are.
Wow, that's so cool. Okay, so you want to be the 28th person to go there.
Yes, and down there in the deep sea, you also get these animals. Well, they're single-celled organisms called xenophores.
Okay.
And they grow like this big, like the head of a cauliflower, and they have all these folds and ridges. Actually, they're not single-cell. They're multicellular animals that all kind of stick together like a colony, but they form just one mass. Wow. Or maybe it's like single-cell multinucleate. We don't need to get into the details,
Show notes.
But it's
single-cell multinucleate or multi-cell conglomerate.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really, really cool.
They're incredible, and they're all over the deep sea, but in areas that deep, you start to get gigantism, so they get quite large. I've heard. Again, I haven't been, but I've heard.
So you're going to go one day.
Yes.
That's going to be 2020. We're going to say 2028 for you. Let's say that.
Yes.
We're bringing that. But in 2026, around the corner, you're going to Antarctica.
Yes.
Tell us about first of all, like, how many people have gone to Antarctica? Is there like
That's
a statistic
a great
for
question.
that?
I do not know.
A small portion of the population.
Yes. And especially if you're talking scientific expeditions, because you do get a lot of people that come through tourism, and that is like highly, it's very expensive. So it's not like people go a lot or all the time.
It's privilege.
Yeah. But you do get like tourist groups.
Wow. Honestly, I barely even knew that. I only knew that from a birding book that I read, where the guy was like, I'm going to start in Antarctica. And I'm like, okay, that probably costs so much money.
It does, yeah.
Good for you for being able to afford that. But mostly, so for like research and science, that's like different. Are you on the same ship as tourists? Is that like,
yeah, we're traveling on the MV Hondius, and I'm going with a group called Sea Women Expeditions, and they have done scientific expeditions to the Arctic, and this is the first time that they're turning their attention towards Antarctica. So it's a group of 25 women that were selected from over 400 global applications, and I'm leading the submersible science team, so that was my specialty that they brought me on for, and then also doing some science communication work and podcasting of my own. But we have all sorts of science happening. There are people that are interested in microplastics. There are going to be some whale and cetacean studies. Me personally, we're doing like ROV submersible dives within bays that used to be old whaling stations. So we're going to be looking at profiling the bones and skeletons that are down there, and then also in Deception Bay studying some of the little hydrothermal vents that are found, shallow water, well, by my standards, shallow water hydrothermal vents that are found in that area, because Deception Bay is like a sunken caldera, so there's a lot of geothermal activity happening. The beach is steaming itself with geothermal activity, and then in the water you get these small scale hydrothermal vents that we're going to go and take a look at. And yeah, that's a big roundabout summary of what I'm doing.
That's so exciting. Is this tied at all to your master's, or like what could be potentially a PhD, or is this just like your own research with this organization?
Yeah, for me it is a side quest right now, because I'll be finished. We're going February 14th to March 10th of 2026, so I would have defended my master's by then, but depending on the data that I pick up, I could use that video imaging that we're going to be doing and seawater profiling for a PhD if I wanted to. But for me, I've spent so much time studying the deep sea and I really love it, but I'm completely enthralled by extreme environments in general. So I really wanted to get into the sector of polar science as well, just dip a toe and see how I could what I could learn, because I think I'm the youngest person on the ship, and there are some women who have been to Antarctica like 7 times. So it's going to be a learning experience for me as well. And yeah.
That's so cool. You're the youngest person on the ship.
I think, yeah.
Or that you know of, at least for the research side of from that perspective. Yeah. How would you say for like youth that are getting involved in like STEM or sciences, like what role do you think youth play in these fields?
We bring fresh perspectives.
Imagination.
Yes, imagination and new ways of seeing things, because, older folks in the sector bring the expertise. They've had decades and decades and they know a lot more. But I always say that when you enter a sector or start a project where you don't really know anything about it, you don't know what you could be doing wrong, quote unquote. Like you tend to do things differently because you haven't spent so many years being trained and following protocol of like, this is how we've always done it, so this is how we're going to do it. And that's how you get new ideas and fresh perspectives and, as I keep mentioning, innovation. When you don't know what the rules you're supposed to play by are. And I think that's what youth bring in.
That's such a good point. I think that I've read, even in like reading helpful photography books or other kind of like arts advice books, like a lot of people talk about, like you mentioned, the people that have been doing it for a long time have that expertise, but there's something about that like new perspective of coming into something and just like you haven't been told no by like people or by the environment, and so it just, I feel like you have so much more like instinct and trust to like be in the moment and like to not have those like barriers of like, no, this won't work, if that makes sense.
Exactly. You try more.
You're less afraid. That's really, really cool. Is it intimidating to be like?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. But I'm the type of person who, like, maybe if you look at the experience I've had, you think I'm not afraid of anything, but I just do it anyway. I do it scared. And that's what you need to do. Because there are lots of positions I've been put in where I have felt that I might have not been quite ready yet, but I wouldn't have that opportunity fall into my lap if I wasn't ready. So do it scared is the motto that I'm trying to get through.
That means so much to me as someone who, and I heard it first in, shout out to Dr. Lori Santos from the Happiness Lab. podcast, which is like one of my favorite podcasts ever, and it's what got me into like even just like podcasting in general. And she's a professor of happiness at Harvard, I believe.
Nice.
or one, maybe I didn't say that right.
Topic to study.
Yeah, happiness. So she teaches like a really famous course called Happiness. I think it's offered for free now, like because Harvard does like some free online classes. I might be saying the wrong school. Maybe it's different Ivy League. But anyway, she had this episode on fear and anxiety, and how I just like really remember this like professor that she interviewed talking about how it's really important to do things like afraid. You said do things. How did you phrase it?
Scared.
Do it scared.
Yeah.
Do it scared. I think a lot about that. Like do it afraid. Even with like podcasting, like this made me really nervous. Like when I'm still a little nervous, but like when we first started on Monday, which was not that long ago, but feels like a long time ago, I was like, this is terrifying. This is really scary.
Well, you're a pro at it.
No.
I feel very comfortable.
So that means so much to me. It's so sweet. But I was so scared, and even before, like every time I'm like I'm terrified, and I think it's just like doing things that part of me was like, maybe you're not meant to because you're afraid. But then I'm like, I really kind of relaxed into it, and I was like, oh, you're afraid because you do care. And so I feel like that's like kind of ties into like research and the adventures and expeditions. Am I saying it right again? Expeditions. That you go on, you just like really putting aside those kind of like fears and anxieties, or not putting them aside, like probably recognizing them and being like, I'm gonna do this anyway because it's something I really care about.
Yeah, and the opportunity wouldn't come to you if you weren't ready in some capacity, so you got to take it.
That's beautiful. And yeah, things that scare you are often important.
Exactly.
And areas for growth to take in. So that's exciting. Are you afraid at all? Because I know that when in my like research I've heard, is it the Drake Passage?
Yes. Yeah.
Are we scared for that?
Well, the seasickness medication will definitely come in handy.
Yeah. Shout out to Gravel.
Yeah.
Or the one that you mentioned.
Bonine.
Yeah, Bonine. Shout out to any ginger candies coming your way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So is the Drake Passage like I know you're here, talking about climate, hydrothermal vents, but like that's like the really intense notorious passage to get. Is it from Argentina?
Yes, because we're leaving from Eurasia, Argentina, and then going across to, I think we start in the Falklands before heading to Antarctica. But.
Gorgeous. That's amazing. That's so cool. Okay, so what do you think in terms of like the researchers that are there with you, and even in your own work there? You talked about like in Departure Bay, you're going to be kind of like an epicenter of where we're really seeing so much of the climate crisis like play out right now, right?
Yeah.
From like melting glaciers to ocean acidification. Like what are you expecting to see there, and like how does your research involve like climate there at all, or any other scientists that you're going out with? Like, are they working specifically on climate science?
It's not my specific research that I'm doing, but we do have a lot of geologists and geophysicists, and they're going to be interested in glaciologists, so they're definitely going to be interested in the disappearing ice. I think for me personally, as somebody who's walking into this and with new eyes, I've never seen Antarctica before. I'm going to be able to, everything is going to look amazing to me, but I'm going to be able to learn a lot from folks who have been there before, and they can talk about how the biodiversity has changed, or how the sea ice has changed since when they first started going. And we are doing a lot of, I mentioned microplastic studies. I mentioned there's glaciologists and people that are interested in the ice coming to run studies of their own. So whatever data they pick up and later on publish, I'll be able to learn from that as well. Because it is always changing. I can relate it to the deep sea in the sense that you always see the effects of humanity no matter where you are. Like, we can be 4,000 meters down with an ROV submersible and we see plastic pollution.
Really?
One time we saw a washing machine. It's like, where did this come from?
You saw a washing machine in the deep
about
ocean?
Like 2,000 meters down, there was a washing machine. Like, somebody had just thrown it over the side of a ship, I guess.
What?
But yeah, so our effects are truly everywhere, and I don't think a lot of people realize that, especially when we talk about faraway places like the poles or like the deep sea, because we don't see it all the time. We kind of begin to think out of sight, out of mind. But we have left our mark on almost every edge of the earth, and we're getting to a dire state if we don't change something soon. So, which I'm sure you know, and yeah,
a bit, but you also know. I'm learning a lot about, my background's like general biology, did take environmental science and a little bit of climate courses there, so something I'm exposed to definitely. But a lot of my like work, especially with my organization, the Starfish, is really around like, youth stories and like amplifying their projects. So I wouldn't say I'm like a deep climate scientist or like knowledgeable deeply in like how climate works. So it's really cool to like see and talk to all these different people that are working, you know, adjacent in the climate field, or even if it's just like we've talked to climate organizers that do like community events like collaging as like a way of like healing through climate anxiety. So that's been really, really cool.
I love that, art and science
together. I know, it's really neat. That's been fascinating. But just like getting, as we like kind of tie up here some of these like big themes, like as even though maybe climate isn't directly tied into that work that you'll be doing, or your specific work in Antarctica, like as an ocean scientist and biologist, microbiologist. I love that. Microbiology is so cool. Shout out to microbiology. Yes. That was one of my favorite subjects. Very hard. I took a pathogenic microbiology class, like crazy. How hard it is to remember some of these things. But you also, I feel like, have to like organic chemistry a bit.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Mine is ecological microbiology, so I work with the genetics of bacteria that live on vents, so it's a lot of like bioinformatics, and I've learned a lot about coding in my degree, because I didn't know how to code at all coming into it, so it's a big learning curve. But.
I also had to do that for some climate modeling courses I took in college, and shout out to coding. And shout out to people that know coding to help you do your assignments. But what would you like hope that people would understand, or like how does your own like work tie into like even emotionally, like if your focus and love is like ocean and deep ocean, especially like the ocean's such a critical role in climate regulation. Is like an ocean is it an ocean sink? Is that what
it's
a carbon sink? Do you have like any kind of ideas on how to explain what a carbon sink is?
That's a good question.
I know it's a complex.
Well, the easiest way I would say is that all of I could explain this actually.
Yes, you can. I love that confidence.
All of the biological life within the ocean. I mentioned this earlier in our recording, but like when it passes away and sinks into the deep ocean, the water in the deep ocean is colder, things decompose a lot slower. So we are all made of carbon. All of the life around us and within us is made of carbon. So when that carbon goes down into the deep ocean, it's then trapped there for years, and and the gases that come out of that, like CO2, it doesn't escape the ocean as quickly as it would if you're in the shallow water region. So that's really the carbon sink aspect of the ocean, if I were to explain it off the top of my head.
And so it's massive, the ocean's massive, and it's able to hold lots of carbon for us that, and we're like and
also the carbon, sorry to interrupt, but also the carbon that's produced from fossil fuels, the ocean absorbs that as well and keeps it within the water and keeps it from reaching the ozone layer and destroying the ozone layer. And methane gas is another greenhouse gas that the ocean keeps within itself. So we'd be in a lot more of a dire situation if we didn't have the ocean regulating CO2 and methane and other gases.
So a lot of people think about like big forests when it comes to that, right? But ocean is such a critical role, and by acidifying the ocean, which is what we're doing by burning fossil fuels and increasing the carbon dioxide in the environment, which increases by nature the carbon dioxide in the ocean because it's transferring, right? Are we making its ability to like uptake carbon less by ocean acidification?
Yeah, in the shallow water regions. I'm not too sure about the deep sea, because I just studied ocean acidification in like Sarasota Bay in Florida for an internship.
I lived in Sarasota.
Oh, nice.
My family's in Sarasota.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I also worked in Sarasota.
I was at Moat Marine Lab.
I was also at Moat Marine. You went to Moat?
Yeah.
You worked in Moat? I worked for their sea turtle conservation and protection program.
I worked in the chemical and physical ecology lab.
Shout out to Moat!
And ocean acidification lab.
Of course you did. That's so cool. Shut the front door. No way. I worked on Casey Key for sea turtle program 1 year, and then Longboat Lido Beach for another year. That's so funny. Wow.
Yeah, that was in 2019, so a while ago now. But
wait, I was also with Moat in 2019.
What?
I was also, when were you there?
I was there from in the fall.
Okay, so we wouldn't have been, because they bring
the summer, because I left in August.
Summer.
Yeah,
I also left in
What?
No. Wait, so we would have been in a room together,
Yeah,
right? Because did you do
probably.
the intern where you got your shirt?
Yes, I did.
You were in the big boardroom where you get the
Yes.
shirt like in April or May?
Yeah, and you went to
We
the Sarasota one, not the Keys.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so we probably were.
We
in
were
the
in
same
a
place.
room together. This is crazy.
Well, that was like the second internship in ocean science I had ever done. Because first
Oh
it was
my
Bermuda,
God.
then I went to Florida. So that was like when I was just starting out in ocean stuff.
And that was your entrance
Yeah.
into, well, it was your second entrance, I
Yeah.
guess. Because that's, we've all been on that internship,
Yeah.
the internship route. Oh my gosh, that is so wild. That is so, so cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
What a small world.
What
eh?
a small world. I'm so shook right now. I'm thrown off in a good way. That's wild. Okay, so you're talking about Sarasota Bay.
Yes.
And yeah, so that's like a shallower bay. So I think you were talking about like how that shallower water like does the ocean acidification there affects more strongly than it does in deeper ocean.
Yes, yeah. To my knowledge, because that's my only expertise. That's my only experience with ocean acidification.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I am just so tickled by this. That is so wild. Have you been with Mo since then, or was it just that one intern?
Just that one.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have people that interned with me at the time that I'm still friends with.
Wow.
And they've gone into different sectors in environment. Some of them are still in ocean sciences as well. Some of them actually still study ocean acidification on corals, shallow water corals. So that's the cool thing about doing these internships is you have a network all around the world afterwards when people go their separate ways and you can keep in touch.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I also have, I call them my sea turtle friends. My sea turtle girlies that I also became close friends with during those days.
I can't believe we were both at Moat.
No, I know, I'm processing that live on camera. That is so wild. I love that. Okay, amazing. Well, let's maybe get to a point where we can send you on your beautiful Saturday way and wrap up by just like maybe talking about, first of all, like, is there anything that we had these like different topics? My phone is being my phone and trying to connect to the Washington like cell service, so I don't have my questions up. But I just want to make sure we covered like some of those topics that you want to talk about today, like accessibility and visibility in the field, imagination. I loved your topics. So when you sent them, I was like, we could talk, like, we could do an episode on imagination. We can do an episode on like deep sea research, and we can do an episode on just like increasing representation, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is beautiful. Shout out to DEI everywhere. Love it. And did we hit some of those topics that you want to talk about today?
Definitely, yeah. I guess I did talk about the imaginative scientists a little bit, but the last thing I would want to say along that vein is not to, as I mentioned, I'm somebody who would have gone to art school if I didn't choose science, and for a long time I felt I had to choose between the two, so I abandoned the artistic side of myself, and then
I did too.
Yeah, that happens so much.
I did too. I wanted to, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to double major in film and biology so I could like make documentaries.
Because so many scientists are artists at heart. Like, so many of us have artistic passions that we either abandoned or some of us held on to it, but some of us come back to it too.
I'm coming back, but I did abandon.
But art and science are way more connected than we think they are in society. Like, everything around us is based off of art and science. Like, there's an artist who designed the way this mic looks, but there is a technologist and maybe scientists that designed how it actually functions. Like, everything is a melody of art and science, I always say. So along that vein, what I wanted to say is that youth listening to this podcast, or anyone listening to this podcast, shouldn't feel like they have to choose a certain path, and your interests are your interests for a reason. So find ways to marry those interests, and that's what I did with the imaginative scientists. And coming back to the artistic side of myself, the communication side of myself, and bringing that in with the scientific expertise that I've built up. So, yeah.
That is such a beautiful point, because I do feel like you have to, or I think society tells us we need to start choosing. Like, we need to start like for lack of a better way of saying it, establishing our like brand, or like diving deeper into those things. Yeah, the one thing that we're like good at. Like for me, I was really good in school with like math and science. Like that came pretty easy to me. But what I was like really interested in was like theater, arts, film, things like that. And it didn't necessarily like come easy to me. And I think we're taught that like if it feels easy, we should like kind of go towards that instead. But like some things are hard, like going to Antarctica and applying for getting these really cool research opportunities. Like that's not easy, but you still pursue it, and it's so beautiful, and like you have so much enthusiasm for this research and like the work that you get to do, you know. So not everything that is easy is, you know, something that not necessarily worth pursuing, but like maybe worth like joining with all these other things that excite you and not like turning your back on something.
Yeah, you can find ways to find crossroads and intersections in whatever lights your fire.
Whatever lights your fire. There was like this advice I read in a grad student book for STEM, like it was like make your own job.
Yes.
Which is hard in theory, but when you really like think about that advice and what that can look like, make your own job. I think that's really or like fill in that gap and like tell people how these things are connected, because we don't have to just do the thing that's already been set out for us, the path that's already like carved forward. You know, we can do these like different paths. This is one of those different paths. We're like, let's make this a podcast in studio. I also wanted to give you an opportunity. Shout out to your podcast. So how can people like find you and connect with your work? And you're going to be making a podcast whenever you're in Antarctica, which that's going to be so exciting. I'm stoked about that. Do you have a name?
Yes. Oh, for the podcast.
For the podcast.
I know. I have like, do I have
What's
a name
your name? Does your podcast have a name yet, or are you giving it time?
I'm giving it time.
Okay,
I'm thinking the working title is Breaking Boundaries at the Bottom of the World. Because that's something that we've been saying throughout the planning of this expedition, of like the theme. That's what we're doing. We're breaking boundaries at the bottom of the world as this team of 25 women going down there and just like crushing it, hopefully.
You will be.
Crushing it. So that's the working title. And I really like it. I don't know if I'll change it, but
that's okay. It can be fluid, but I like the working title. Crushing boundaries at the bottom. Breaking boundaries at the bottom of the world. That's so exciting. So you'll be making this podcast, and that's going to be like did you mention February to March? Okay.
That's when I'll be filming it, and then I'll be releasing the episodes slowly when I get back from the expedition over the course of 2026.
Amazing. And then also, on top of that, we can find you at Imaginative Scientist.
It's you can find me on my website, moronkeharris.com. And you can also find me on social media at Imaginative Sci. So just the word imaginative and then SCI, and that's my handle for most things.
I love that. Did you ever watch like early Disney? Have you ever been to Disney World?
Yeah. No, actually, I haven't been to Disney World, but I did watch Disney.
Early Disney. Yeah, there was this like character called Figment that is like the imagination, but this is like retro Disney. I never saw it, but I have been on the ride at Disney World, and it's I'll have to send you the link to it, because he's like, it's all about the imagination. And I've been picturing him this whole time, and I want him to be like our mascot for this episode.
I love that.
Figment.
My motto is stay imaginative.
Yes, you would love this. Yeah. You'll have to like watch the YouTube ride of the Figment. It's very, very vintage. I love it. You love it. It could be the little mascot for this episode. But I think that's super important to connect, and like really ties into arts, which ties into like a lot of the other episodes I think you're going to really like. Like when this podcast is released, we've been like really talking to artists, and it feels like something that in the past I think a lot of people wouldn't have associated directly with like climate, which is like very like it's seemingly like very like a logical kind of research or like field of study, but this podcast is proving it's not. So shout out to art. Shout out to art and artists. Well, that's great. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you
on
for
our
having
little
me. This
podcast.
is so much fun.
Can we do it again?
Yeah.
Let's do it again sometime. Bring me to Antarctica.
I'll just put you in my suitcase.
Yeah. Well, okay, the ROVs are big.
Well, we're using mini ones.
Shout out to our camera operator, Britton McCubbin. This podcast was produced with support from TELUS STORYHIVE. Special thanks to the Starfish Canada for bringing this vision to life. I'm your host, Claire Marshall, and this is Seeds of Hope. We can't wait to see you next time.